So we have the book that was just released, and now four very special people in Neha's life will discuss it and review the book, Body Betrayed Beauty. Sunanda Vashisht, a political commentator and a writer herself, Neha's eldest cousin on the maternal side, as far as I know, and a confidant, shall moderate the discussion between Anjali Shekhar Zutshi, a lawyer by profession, who, together with Neha, have given the family and the extended family and friends some of the most memorable moments in form of their dance items together. Nihar Ganju, Neha's brother, a gynecologist by profession, but a younger sibling who always was the apple of Neha's eye, and I know that for a fact. And Charles Carmichael, a friend of Neha's since the time they went to University of Florida together. So can we have the four on stage to discuss and review the book?
Thank you, Karthike, for that kind introduction, and I speak on behalf of all of us. It's an honor to be here and to talk about the book, but to share a little bit of a personal story and a personal anecdote that happened this morning. I did not want to get out of the bed this morning. I did not want to be here. And those who know me know how unusual that is for someone who enjoys talking, much to the chagrin of people around me. It was very unusual that I just wanted to disappear this morning. And then I thought to myself, what would Neha tell me at this time? And she would say, dress up and show up. And that's exactly what I did. I dressed up and I showed up. The book, Anjali and I have been, Anjali more than me, we've been involved with the making or the editing of this book. And I had in the past, when I was reading or editing or giving comments, I was only reading the bits and pieces of the manuscript. I had never read the book from the beginning to the end at one go. And then last week, when I knew I had to do this, I sat up one night, and even though I knew the content almost by heart, I sat up and I read the book entirely one more time as a reader. And one thing that occurred to me, one word that occurred to me at that point was, what an honest book this is. And what a fearless book this is. It's fearless exactly because Neha talked about her fears. It's a courageous book because Neha actually spoke about the moments when she lost courage. And it's a timeless book because it speaks to all of us in our own way, in our own, whatever we are dealing at, whatever stage of life we are in. Next 20, 25 minutes, four of us will discuss the book. All of us have read it. And we have known Neha in different ways. Karthike has already said that. And through our conversation and through a few anecdotes, we will try to bring the book and the author to you. Anjali, my first question to you. You and Neha, more than cousins and sisters, were twins, just a few months apart from each other. Uh, Tell me, how did you get involved with the editing of the book? What happened? Tell me the chronology. What happened? When were you involved? When were you brought in?
So, shortly after she passed away, I think that Neha's mom would, at times go through her phone. And she started discovering that Neha had started writing, and it was writing all kinds of things. And actually, and she told me about it, and for a while we considered presenting them in an op-ed. But as time went on, she discovered that there was a ton of writings and she compiled them all in a Word document. There were just snippets here and there, and a lot of stream of consciousness, if you will. And she would send them to me, and as we reviewed everything, we decided that we probably had enough to make a book. So I sort of, everything that you read in there is her voice, it's her words. But as you can imagine, it was written at a time that was very tumultuous and a lot of emotions. And so, I think really we just wanted to frame things correctly and make sure that there was coherence and turn it into a book.
So what were it's one thing to say that you want to present something as a book, but for few of us who know how the publishing world works, it's not easy to get the books published, especially books like this. So what were some of the hurdles you faced while putting this book across and, talking to publishers and making sure that it sees the light of the day?
So I did not do the heavy lifting on talking to publishers. That was all Neha's mom. But I can speak more just to the substance of the book.
Yes.
And I think my biggest challenge was, like I said, this was, we kept, and she would at times, she'd find more and more, and she just kept sending things and saying, I found another thing, should we use this, should we use this? So my objective was, as you'll see, the book is divided into two parts. And I think two of the themes that I really saw was, one of them was describing her journey. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't miss any part in putting that in chronological order, because it wasn't necessary.
My point more was the way you put it together.
Yeah.
So the book is a memoir, but then there are musings and there are
That
poetry.
was a separate
so
section.
That's what you did.
That was my idea,
make
was
it
to create a
palatable
part
to the
one and a
publishers,
part
yeah.
two, so we had a more chronological part.
Yeah.
And then everything else that was just so much of a reflection of her mind and her soul.
Yeah.
They were her musings, and
Yes.
so that's how I framed them, and we put them in a part two. And then she also had a ton of poetry, and as many of you know, Neha was fluent in Hindi, so she even wrote in Hindi, and she had poetry in English and Hindi, and my aunt translated so many of them along with her uncle. And then, we also wanted to make sure that when it got translated in English, that it continued to keep that poetic flow. Yeah. And so I also worked on some of that part of it as well.
Wonderful. I'll come back to you and we'll talk about takeaways from the book for each one of us a little later. And before I move to Charles, taking from what I was talking earlier, there is a small passage from the book that I personally find very uplifting, and I'm sure everyone will too. And this book is really not a self-help book. It's not a book that you find in grocery stores, 20 ways of living life better. It's not one of those books. It's a book that will speak to each one of you differently. So whatever we are saying is our perspective, but don't go by it. You will have to read the book yourself, and at every stage of life that you are, the book will speak differently to you, and that's what I felt. Especially, Neha wasn't out there to give a template, if you will, of the life. That was not her message. That was not, she understood very early that each one of us, how we meet the challenges will be different. So what she was trying to do was give her side of the story of how she did it, and so that you can find some encouragement from there. Especially this little piece that I find very moving, and it speaks to me, is each journey is different, and no two people will experience the same situations. So it's difficult to imagine or relate to, and they try to understand, maybe relying on what they have seen or heard, but other people's journeys may be worse or better, so there is really no comparison. Others may have detected cancer early, had a few treatments, and then were in remission, or they had cycles of chemo with no side effects or many side effects, or worst of all, underwent everything and still did not make it. None of this was my story. So talking about a person who had cancer and now is fine means nothing. It's like saying that this person went to college and is now a CEO. This is not going to be true for all the people who go to college. That really resonates with me quite a bit. Charles, you have been Neha's friend since college, and you've obviously seen a different side of her than the family has. And suddenly we brought you here, we sent you the book, and we told you to read the book, and you got introduced to Neha, the author. What were the similarities between the two people? Did you think these were two different people, or did they overlap?
No, I definitely saw a lot of overlap, but it gave me a lot of depth when I read her book. And it was honestly, it was a little bit strange to me, because it was like I was reading somebody's diary in a way. And you don't read other people's diaries, but this was clearly something that she wrote that, well, she definitely wanted her daughter to read it. I hope she wanted other people to read it as well. I don't know if she knew that the book was going to come out of this. But anyway, I knew her as a friend in college. I knew that she loved arts, she loved dance, she was very creative. I knew that she was religious, but I got a certain level of depth about just how much she liked arts and liked creativity, and how religious she was. And it wasn't necessarily about a particular religion. I mean, one of the things she says in the book is that it was guidance to her daughter. It was whatever religion you focus on, it doesn't really matter to her, but make sure you study religion. You understand the differences, and you pick something and you follow it. And so it gave me a lot of visibility into her in a way that I didn't really know her before.
Yeah. So give me an anecdote. When you think of Neha, an anecdote from college that sort of defines her for you and that's left an everlasting memory in your mind. I know a lot of Neha's friends are in the room as well, and I would like to thank them all for making this journey and making it special for all of us here, and I believe you speak on behalf of all of them. Give us an anecdote that sort of defined her.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely a fighter, and maybe I'll give you an anecdote from later on in life when she was actually sick. But I remember seeing her at the hospital, and this was probably later on, maybe 4 months or so before she passed. But she just kept fighting it, and she wanted to live because, well, mostly because she wanted to be there for her daughter. And you saw the pain that she went through and the struggle, and it's really hard for anybody to endure it. And I'd get pretty regular updates from her how she was feeling, and it was a constant stream of pain. She'd push the button at the hospital to get more morphine because it was honestly uncomfortable. But she wanted to be there for her daughter, and so she was very clearly a fighter. And I never really felt that she gave up. And I think a lot of us probably would have given up. I think I would have given up. And maybe I wouldn't. Maybe because I have kids, maybe that would have driven me. But it was just really inspiring to see how much she just fought through all the pain, the suffering, the agony. And one of the things that I wanted to do when I found out that that cancer was real for her, and I always remember the first time I found out she had cancer. We were actually supposed to hang out, and I texted her. She didn't text me back, and think she had the operation. Anyways, she texted me like a week later or so, and she said she had cancer, but it's okay. Everything's taken care of. We got it out. And when I kind of dug into it and kind of understood the severity of it, as much hope that I want to have, I was kind of realistic about it, and I kind of understood that, hey, this is pretty serious. And as much as I wanted to keep hope, I think she kept as much hope as she could, and she kept fighting until the end. But I wanted to be as realistic about it, and I wanted to make sure that of the remaining months or years, and hopefully it was years, that it was as comfortable for her and as good as it possibly could be. And so, anyways, in terms of her, I think she's just an incredible fighter and just kept going on.
True.
Most people wouldn't have done that.
I think that's one thing that everyone in this room who's known her, whether all her life or even for a few moments or even few days, will agree that she was a fighter. Neha told me about her diagnosis herself. I remember the phone call very clearly. I was probably among the first people, probably the first person, when this was happening. She was still in Dallas. And we didn't know the extent of it, but she told me. And the first thing, and I wasn't able to, understand the severity of it. But the first thing I remember her talking and saying is, and she said to me in Hindi, because she and I spoke in Hindi, and she said, "Aapko maine pareshan kiya," which means that I'm troubling you. And that line never, I kept thinking, you know what you're going through, and you're troubling me, but that was who she was, and that sort of defined her for me. I'm truly happy today that Nihar has agreed to join us here. It took a little work, but I'm glad he's here. Those of you who don't know, but we are a big family. But three of us have a Kashmir connection. Neha, Nihar, and I, because we lived for the most impressionable years of our life in Kashmir. So you and Neha moved here pre-adolescence, almost at an adolescent level. And I know from a fact how difficult that can be. So for two of you, you had each other. You were friends. You were just a year and a half apart, almost twins. Although she was always a big sister. She never let you forget that ever for a minute. But it was the two of you together getting through this system. Tell me about that time when you had moved here, and did you see any glimpses of that struggle in this book?
I think when we moved here, she wasn't somebody who expressed struggle directly. So to me in this book, some of those personal struggles that she actually expressed in words, most of her life with her family, with her friends, she had a message of, you can get through this, and that it doesn't need to be defined as a struggle. And so I think when we first moved to the country, she had always taken things in stride while we were in India and while we were here. And it's something that I have learned from her, that that's how you need to lead your life, is in stride. And that struggle isn't what defines us. What defines us is how you get through it. And it's something that I think when we keep talking about Neha as a quote-unquote fighter, to me that's what that means, and that's, from my reading of the book, that's how I take it, that she's meant, what she means by it. But on a very, very personal level, as a fighter too, she was a fighter, and if you take that to the extreme, the person who gets the brunt of the most fighting is
was
the
you.
brother, the younger brother.
Yes.
So Neha the fighter also means I have to fight her back. And
Yes.
I've learned a lot of fighting back through her, and have always been grateful for what I've learned from even that.
True. It's interesting. Neha was a very creative person also. Apart from her professional life, she had a zillion interests. She wanted to, I think Dheeraj said it very correctly, she wanted to do everything from putting a designer store in Bandra to working in movies to designing clothes and to being an engineer. She wanted to do everything. It was almost as if she knew her life was short and she needed to do everything. And she pretty much did everything as much as she could. But there was also, Neha was also about song and dance. She loved to dance and she loved music. What are some of your memories about her creativity where Anjali and Neha, and I'll ask Anjali's point of view later, but this is your time to tell the world, how did they bully you? And how were you, the younger brother, how did you put up and fight back? This is your time.
We'll keep the bullying for another time. But Neha always had, I've always viewed Neha as, in terms of her aspirations, she always did have creative aspirations.
True.
And she always had very professional aspirations. And I think in both of those, she was very satisfied in terms of, at her stage in life, what she had achieved in both of those. At a very young age, even in Kashmir, I remember sitting by the window. I may not have had the same kind of visual creativity. My interests were usually on the musical side, but Neha liked to visually express herself.
Yeah, she was a very visual person.
She liked to draw. She liked to color. She liked to have a performance. She liked to dance. She liked to learn how to dance. She liked to, with Anjali, make up a fake airlines that we drive around in an Indian van in, but it's really they're putting together this Angel Puck Airlines and announcing to us to have seats and get ready for the meal.
Yes, I remember this so clearly.
Yes. And something that I have not personally experienced myself of Neha, but I've seen videos and from her friends I've learned a lot about is her performances when she was in college and what she put together and how she liked to kind of continue to express herself through dance and through performances with her friends. And that is what gave her the most joy, is her friends and her creative performances when they came together. The writings subsequently, the creative expression of writing to me is a very different side of Neha though.
Yeah.
That, her ability to write, I was not aware of. And something that, as you read this book, there is a tone and flavor to how she speaks and how she interacts and her language. That is, I think, very unique in this book. And to me, it's unique because it's unique with me. She was born in India and lived there for half her life and then came to America. So her language, in turn, has also evolved to take elements of speech from both sides, which I shared with her. And we always had some unspoken language, but in our spoken language, we have a blend of Hindi and English. And so when you read the book, you'll see that language if you pay attention to it, if that blend comes through.
I know.
And sometimes it's not easy to read for somebody who is not, who expects to read a very Americanized English book. But to me, it's the authenticity of who she was, and her voice comes through in her writings.
I think that's a great point when you say that her voice comes through. This book really is her, and even though we had editors working on it, I think it was a very concerted attempt to let her voice, and I'll let Anjali come in on this, to let her voice speak and not shadow that. Would you agree? We let her voice come through the way she spoke.
Yeah, I think that was actually the primary task, was
Yeah.
to be really conscientious about not putting our words in her mouth.
Yes.
While still trying to create that
And that's a difficult
cohesion.
task.
It was.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
a really. It was a challenge.
Yeah.
But
We managed to do that, and that comes through the book. When I read the book again last week, this definitely does come through. We can sit here and talk about Neha like for another 365 days, but I don't have that much time. I have to wrap it up. So what I will do is I will go to each one of you and ask you, while you were working on this book, Anjali, this was also a personal journey of sorts. I mean, it goes without saying what you must have gone through.
right.
What was your spiritual journey, or what did you learn at the end of the process?
Obviously, it's a really emotional thing to see kind of what, and I mean, I think obviously while she was going through the journey, she did talk a lot about these things to me, so I wasn't surprised to learn about her musings. But I think the most poignant thing for me was that when a person is faced with the end of their life, knowing that, what are you thinking about? And I think that's a real testament to a person's true character. And she was tormented by a lot of things, and obviously
Like
the
all human
largest
beings
thing
are,
was
yeah.
leaving Ariana. But she didn't lose sight of, as you read, especially when you talk about her musings, I mean, she was focused on the most important things in a person's life. Her relationships, there's chapters about her grandmother, there's memories of us together when we were kids. I mean, and I think that is a true testament to who she was, that even though death was breathing down her neck, she was able to think about the loftier things and convey these thoughts so articulately in this book. And I don't know that someone that young normally, when, and the thing is she was in constant pain. And in that pain, I mean, it's very easy to just kind of be focused on the pain, and not be able to get past that. And, we all know these sort of spiritual truths and greater truths of life, but how many of us are going to be able to tap into that, internalize it, and leave that as our legacy when we're counting the days?
Yeah.
And in her book, she does just that.
That's very inspiring, very extremely inspiring. When you read that, I have to let everyone know that most of what you see in this book, most of it was written on an iPhone between two treatments, or between two doctors' visits, or between planning pain management, or between working on what to do next because she really took control of her treatment. And so most of this book really was written on the iPhone and iPad. So that's something to keep in mind. And yet, as Anjali said, those lofty thoughts that never left her. She became more than her disease. She became more than her afflictions. She rose above all that. And that comes across amply in the book. Charles, coming to you, what was your takeaway, one takeaway, and from the book? 30 seconds.
Yeah. There's actually a passage in there in the book that was in the video that was displayed about maybe 45 minutes ago. And it was really an ask of her to everybody else just to really cherish the time that you have, to help other people, to make things easier for others. And it was a very selfless message for people to just to do better to other people. And that was probably my biggest takeaway.
Yeah. Neha, do you want to read a short passage that sort of speaks to you the most from the book?
Yeah, and I'll add a comment once I read this. So the passage, so she starts by saying, "I welcome death with open arms, It is just as much a part of living as breathing is. You cannot accomplish one without the existence of the other. Do not fear it. It is frightening, but liberating. And to me, these are really important words because I think it shows two things. I think it shows that she was struggling with the conflict that her mortality is within sight. But she was trying to resolve her mortality against the backdrop of recognizing that she still has an instinct of life. And how do you reconcile the two?
Yeah.
And these words here, I think, show that she had reconciled the two, that she had accepted and wasn't fighting what was coming. She felt that this is what's being given to her.
Yeah.
But it speaks a lot to me, and it's a part in the book that I
That's
look back at
certainly what spoke a lot to me too. Anjali, do you quickly want to read a short passage, keep it very short, of which something that really spoke to you from the book? Yeah, Charles will do it. No, Charles can do it later. I'll go to Charles last.
Okay, so the passage that I chose was in her chapter about her daughter. So this is a message that she directs to Ariana, and she says, "If there is anything I want you to take away from my life, it is always to give a helping hand. Human relations are the most precious gift we have and live with. I truly believe that being there for one another is our purpose in life. Never shy away from helping others or going that extra step. I truly think that the journey of the person is important to understand a person fully. The journey defines you as much as your actions do. I hope, besides the stories I have shared with you, that people who knew me share their version of who they thought I was, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the criticisms included. Because a person is not just one definition, but all facets of truth. To truly love, understand, trust, and value a person, one must know the journey that led to where the person ended up. And then you accept the journey and the present person. Remember that nothing is constant. This is what love is. I do not want you to love me just because I'm your mother, but because you know the person that I was."
Yeah, thank you. Charles, just give me 2 sentences. I have only 15 seconds to end this now. So just 2 sentences that you thought were most poignant for you.
Yeah, it was what was on the video.
Yeah.
And I'll just go real quickly. For anybody in distress, anybody who's struggling, or anybody troubled, simply do something from wherever you are to show you're there for them. No effort is too small, and no effort goes unnoticed.
That's really, on that point, we will wrap this up. That is truly the message of this afternoon, that, if the real tribute to Neha would be to help each other and never let anyone alone. Neha never wanted to be left alone. She never wanted to be left alone. She never left anyone alone. So that's probably the message of this evening. I just want to end with one little quote that I want to say, leave you guys with. And this is from my favorite author, V.S. Naipaul, who's one of his unpublished essays just got published in this month's New Yorker. And he's talking about the grief and his father who had left him, and that grief he had never been able to deal with. And he says, and only Naipaul can speak this way, and he says, "It was a poor way of thinking. We are never finished with grief. It's part of the fabric of living. It's always waiting to happen. Love makes memories and life precious. The grief that comes to us is proportionate to that love and is inescapable." Thank you, Ganju family, for giving us this time. Thank you to all of you for being here. And thank you to all my panelists. Sorry, Kartikeya, we took a bit of extra time, but we tried. We just cannot talk about Neha in stipulated time, but sorry about that. But thank you, Nihar, thank you, Charles, and thank you, Anjali. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you to all four of you.